I still remember the moment my world shattered, the shock that stole my breath and made everything around me freeze. Sarah, my wife, and I had been married for 8 years, and she was everything to me. I thought our life together was picture perfect, until a text changed everything. It happened late one evening when I was organizing some work documents on our shared computer. I heard a notification ping and glanced at the screen without thinking, expecting it to be something mundane. Instead, it was a message from my best friend, Mike. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Don't worry, he'll never find out." My heart dropped. Mike was my best friend, my brother in every sense but blood. We'd been inseparable since childhood, through all the big moments, weddings, birthdays, and even the rough patches in life. Trusting him was as natural as breathing. Confusion, disbelief, and a nauseating sense of betrayal clawed at me. My brain spun, refusing to believe what was so plainly written in black and white. And Sarah, my mind couldn't reconcile the loving wife I knew with the woman who could sneak behind my back with my best friend. But the text was undeniable. At that moment, I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to confront them both, and I needed proof that I wasn't jumping to conclusions. The first step was to gather evidence. My mind raced, thinking of the endless questions that would need answers. How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or were there feelings involved? I couldn't let my imagination run wild. I needed to know the truth. The next day, I made an excuse about a work trip and left the house early. But instead of heading to the office, I parked around the corner and waited, watching our front door from a distance. The minutes dragged on, each second a small torment as I fought the urge to march back in and confront her right there. But something held me back. If this was as serious as I feared, confronting her too early might just make things messy. Around noon, my patience was rewarded, or maybe it was punished. I saw Mike's car pull up, and my heart sank as he stepped out, glancing around before heading up to our front door. Sarah let him in, her smile too warm, too familiar. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, feeling a rage that I hadn't thought I was capable of. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, to scream and ask them how they could betray me like this. But I needed more. More than anger, I needed clarity, proof. I pulled out my phone, trembling as I dialed the number of a private investigator I knew through a friend. In that moment, hiring someone to confirm what I just witnessed felt like admitting my marriage was dead. But I couldn't trust myself to confront them yet. I needed to be sure. "Hey, this is John. I need your help with something personal." The next few days felt like an eternity. Every time Sarah smiled at me, I wanted to scream, to ask her why she thought I deserved this. I couldn't bring myself to touch her, and each innocent moment between us was tainted by the image of her with Mike. The investigator didn't take long. By the end of the week, he'd gathered everything I needed, and what he showed me was worse than I could have imagined. Photos, dates, text logs, it was all there, laid out in brutal detail. They'd been sneaking around for months, and the things they shared in their messages made my stomach churn. The worst part? They mocked me, laughing about how I'd never suspect a thing, how naive and trusting I was. I sat in silence as the investigator packed up his materials. "If there's anything else I can help with," he offered, but I shook my head. The help I needed now wasn't something he could give me. This was between me, Sarah, and Mike. I knew I had to confront them, but I wanted to do it on my terms. I started planning my approach carefully, making sure everything would be in place. This wasn't going to be just an emotional outburst. I wanted them to understand exactly what they had done. I wanted them to feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. Finally, I arranged for Sarah and Mike to meet in private, without them knowing I'd be there. I set up a friend's cabin, a place we'd all gone together before, hoping the familiarity would make them feel comfortable enough to show their true colors. Little did they know, this time, there would be no hiding. The night of the confrontation arrived. I drove to the cabin early, long before either of them would show up, and parked my car out of sight. Inside, I set up a small camera in the corner of the living room, making sure it was hidden but pointed right where I knew they'd sit. I wanted this conversation recorded, not just for me, but to make sure they couldn't twist the story later. I waited in silence, watching the minutes tick by as my pulse hammered in my ears. At exactly 7 p.m., I saw the headlights from Mike's car pull up. He stepped out, glancing around casually, looking like the carefree best friend he'd pretended to be all these years. A few minutes later, Sarah arrived, her demeanor more cautious, a slight nervousness in her expression. I wondered if she could sense something was off, if maybe she felt even the slightest bit of guilt. They entered the cabin, their voices low as they spoke, laughing about how they'd finally found some time alone together. My stomach twisted, and I fought the urge to burst in right then, but I held back. I needed to hear what they'd say, to see them admit to everything. As they settled down on the couch, I stepped out of the shadows. The moment they saw me, their laughter died instantly, replaced by a look of shock and horror. "Surprised to see me?" I said, my voice steady, though inside I was trembling. They were both silent, frozen in place, like two kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Finally, Sarah managed to stammer, "John, what are you doing here?" I raised an eyebrow. "I think the better question is, what are you both doing here?" Sarah and Mike looked at each other, both visibly panicked. The silence between us was thick, oppressive, each second dragging out longer than the last. Mike, who had always been the smooth talker, tried to regain his composure first. "John, man, listen. This isn't what it looks like," he started, his voice shaky. But his usual confidence was gone. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the small cabin. "Not what it looks like. So what is it, Mike? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think it is." Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "Save it, Sarah. I've seen the texts, the photos. I know everything." Her face turned white. She glanced down, wringing her hands, searching for words. "John, please. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It just happened. It just happened," I repeated, letting the words sink in. "With my best friend, the person I trusted most in this world, besides you." Mike finally spoke up again, though his voice was small. "John, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry, man." "Oh, now you're sorry?" I snapped. "You weren't sorry when you were sneaking around behind my back. You weren't sorry when you were mocking me, calling me naive." I took a step closer, my anger burning through any remaining restraint. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Or did you just not care?" Neither of them could answer. They just sat there, looking at each other, trapped in the silence of their own guilt. I let the silence stretch out, watching as the weight of their betrayal sank into the room like a stone dropped into still water. It felt good, in a twisted way, to see them squirm, to see them unable to wriggle out of this with smooth words and false apologies. Finally, I spoke again, my voice cold and steady. "You know, I always thought that if I ever faced something like this, I'd be angry enough to lash out, to do something I'd regret." I paused, letting my words linger. "But seeing you both like this, I feel nothing but disgust. And maybe that's worse." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I took a step back, and her hand dropped. "John, please, can we just talk about this? I made a mistake. I don't even know why it happened, but it doesn't mean I don't love you." "Love me?" I repeated, barely keeping my composure. "If this is your version of love, Sarah, then I want nothing to do with it. You betrayed me, and you brought him," I gestured toward Mike, "into our marriage like it was nothing." Mike shifted uncomfortably, his face pale. "John, you have to believe me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought maybe I was just—" "Spare me." I cut him off. "You thought what? That it was okay because you felt entitled? Or maybe because you thought I'd be too blind to notice? You two took advantage of my trust, my loyalty. Do you even understand the gravity of what you've done?" Sarah sobbed quietly, her face buried in her hands, but my sympathy had evaporated. I felt like a stranger looking at people I once knew, but no longer cared about. As they sat there, trying to come up with something, anything, that could justify what they'd done, I decided to deliver the final blow. "I didn't come here just to confront you both. I came here to end this." Their heads snapped up, faces twisted in shock. "End this?" Sarah whispered. her voice barely audible, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Yes, Sarah, I'm done. I pulled out a manila envelope from my jacket and tossed it on the coffee table between us. Inside, you'll find the divorce papers. I've already signed them. All that's left is for you to do the same. Sarah's mouth opened and closed as if she was struggling to find the words. Finally, she stammered, John, please, don't do this. I know I messed up, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, try to fix things. We have so much history together. History? I scoffed. The only thing our history shows me is that I should have never trusted either of you. I was a fool, Sarah, and I'm done being a fool. Mike stood up, trying to play the peacemaker, though he looked as lost as she did. John, man, maybe just give it some time. Don't make any rash decisions. I turned to him, letting my anger surface just enough to make him flinch. A rash decision? This wasn't made overnight, Mike. I've spent the last few days watching you both betray me, reading your messages, seeing you laugh behind my back. So, trust me, this decision is anything but rash. Sarah's face crumpled, and she reached for me again. Please, John, I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. Don't throw away everything we built. I looked down at her, my heart hardened against her pleas. You already threw it away, Sarah. The second you invited him into our lives, our marriage was over. I'm just here to put the final nail in the coffin. Her tears were streaming down her face now, and I could see she finally understood there was no coming back from this. There would be no forgiveness, no patching things up, just the cold reality of consequences she had never thought would come. For a moment, I let the silence stretch, letting both of them feel the weight of their actions. Sarah was still crying, clutching a tissue that had long been soaked with her tears. Mike, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch, his usual smug confidence utterly deflated. After a few moments, I broke the silence. You know, I always thought betrayal was something that happened to other people. I thought our marriage, our friendship, was built on something stronger than that. I glanced at Mike. And you, Mike. My best friend since middle school, the guy I trusted with everything. I never thought you'd be the one to stab me in the back. Mike's gaze dropped to the floor. He muttered, I don't know what to say, John. I messed up big time. And I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. Sorry? I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. You know, you two didn't just betray me. You made a mockery of everything I believed in. I trusted you both with my life, and you treated me like a fool. I could see my words hitting them like blows, but I didn't care. They deserved every bit of the pain they were feeling, though I knew it was nothing compared to what I'd been through in the past few days. Sarah tried once more. John, please. If I could take it all back, I would. I love you. Love? I laughed, but it came out hollow. You don't destroy the person you love. You don't laugh about him behind his back with his best friend. No, Sarah, that isn't love. That's selfishness. And I've had enough of it. I picked up my keys and headed toward the door, but before leaving, I turned back one last time. Sign the papers, Sarah. You're free to be with him, but you're also free of me. With that, I walked out, leaving them both stunned in the cabin, the hollow echoes of their betrayal ringing behind me. The drive home was surreal. My mind was still replaying the confrontation, each word, each shocked look on their faces. It should have felt like victory, like some satisfying end to the nightmare, but instead, it left me feeling hollow, drained. As I pulled into my driveway, I realized that everything in my life was about to change. I'd built my world around Sarah, around our marriage, and now all of that was gone. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a dark, unknown void. That night, I lay in our empty bed, staring up at the ceiling, feeling the cold weight of loneliness settle over me. My mind raced with questions. What had gone wrong? Was it me? Had I been blind to signs for months, maybe years? I hated that my thoughts kept circling back to them, but I couldn't help it. Every quiet second felt like another painful reminder of how easily I'd been betrayed. The next morning, I decided to take some time off work. I needed space to clear my head and figure out what came next. I knew it would be impossible to just jump back into my routine like nothing had happened. My life had split in two, and there was no stitching it back together. But I also knew that I couldn't wallow in it forever. I wasn't going to let them destroy me, not completely. If anything, I would make something of myself that would prove them wrong, prove to myself that I was stronger than they had ever given me credit for. As I drank my coffee, I made a silent promise to myself. I would rebuild. I would take back everything they had tried to tear down, piece by piece. And if they ever looked my way again, it would be to see a person who didn't need them, a person who had moved on without them. Over the next few weeks, I began to pull myself together, slowly but surely. I threw myself into projects around the house, renovating rooms that had long needed attention, clearing out clutter, and making the space my own. Each task kept my mind busy, helping to stave off the darker thoughts that threatened to creep in whenever I slowed down. I reached out to a few close friends, people who had been part of my life before Sarah and Mike. And though I hadn't been in touch as much over the years, they welcomed me back without hesitation. It felt like rediscovering pieces of myself that I'd lost somewhere along the way. One evening, as I was sorting through some old photo albums, I stumbled upon a picture of the three of us, Sarah, Mike, and me. We looked happy, carefree, the kind of friends who thought nothing could ever come between us. It struck me how deceiving appearances could be, how easily people can hide who they truly are, even from those closest to them. I wanted to feel anger, but all I felt was a strange numbness. The betrayal had left scars that were deeper than I'd expected. Every time I thought I was ready to let go of the hurt, another reminder would surface, dragging me back into the painful realization of what they'd done. But with every day that passed, I grew a little stronger. I could see glimpses of a future where their betrayal didn't define me, where I could finally move on and build something new for myself. My life was mine again, and I was determined to make it better than ever before. Just as I was finding some stability, the unexpected happened. Sarah reached out. She called one evening, her number flashing on my screen, and for a moment, I stared at it, unsure if I should answer. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave her in the past where she belonged. But another part, a small flicker of curiosity or maybe closure, made me pick up. John, her voice was quiet, tentative. I could almost feel her uncertainty through the phone. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I wanted to apologize. I said nothing, letting her continue. I wasn't going to make this easy for her, not after what she put me through. I've been thinking about everything, about what I did to you, to us. I can't believe how badly I messed up, John. I hurt the person who loved me the most. I was selfish, and I don't even have a good reason. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. There it was. An apology, but it didn't have the impact she probably thought it would. Hearing her say the words didn't erase the months of betrayal, didn't undo the pain she and Mike had caused. Sarah, I finally said, my voice steady, calm. I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything. You made a choice to betray me and everything we built together. You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed something sacred. She took a shaky breath, and I could hear the faint sound of her trying to hold back tears. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I had to tell you. I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. For a moment, I felt a twinge of something, maybe pity, or perhaps a faint echo of the love I once had for her. But it passed quickly, replaced by the resolve I'd built up over these past weeks. I hope you do, Sarah. I really do, I replied, feeling a strange sense of peace. But I've moved on. This chapter of my life is over, and I'm not looking back. With that, I hung up, letting the silence of the room settle around me. This time, I didn't feel hollow or empty. For the first time, I felt free. In the days that followed, I felt lighter, as if a weight I'd been carrying had finally lifted. I had confronted the last vestiges of my past with Sarah, and now there was nothing tying me to that painful chapter. I was free to focus on my own future, without the shadows of betrayal looming over me. I poured my energy into building my life anew. I joined a gym, something I'd been putting off for years, and it felt surprisingly good to push myself, to feel my body grow stronger. I also started reconnecting with old hobbies, hiking, photography, things that made me feel alive again. Each step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd lost along the way. One weekend, I decided to go on a solo camping trip, a chance to clear my mind completely, to be in nature, away from all distractions. It was the first time in years that I was truly alone, and instead of feeling lonely, I felt at peace. Watching the sun set over the mountains, the air crisp and the world quiet, I realized just how much I had allowed myself to shrink over the years, how much of myself I'd sacrificed trying to keep everyone else happy. I stood there, breathing in the fresh mountain air, and it hit me that this was the start of something real, a new chapter that I would write on my own terms. And for the first time in months, I smiled, a genuine smile that came from a place of hope, not bitterness. As I sat by the campfire that night, I thought about the life I wanted to build now, a life that didn't involve people who could betray me. I realized that this experience, as painful as it had been, had stripped away the illusion and left me with something pure, something true. And I was determined to make the most of it. When I returned from the mountains, I felt rejuvenated, clearer than I had in years. I didn't just want to survive the betrayal, I wanted to thrive despite it. With a renewed focus, I threw myself into work, but this time, I wasn't just doing it to pass the hours or distract myself. I was building something. I took on new projects, connected with clients I'd lost touch with, and even explored some side ventures I'd been too hesitant to try before. My job wasn't just a paycheck anymore. It became my personal declaration of independence and strength. And as the weeks passed, I noticed that people around me could sense the change. Friends and colleagues commented on how different I seemed, more confident, more focused. For the first time, I was living life on my own terms, without compromising who I was or second-guessing every move. I realized how much I had changed, stronger, more resilient, and somehow more optimistic than I had been before all this happened. One evening, while sorting through some paperwork, I found the signed divorce papers Sarah had mailed back. I paused, staring at the document that represented the final, official end of that chapter. Instead of sadness, though, I felt a sense of closure, like I was holding the proof that I had survived the storm and come out stronger on the other side. I took a deep breath, folded the papers neatly, and filed them away. They were no longer a reminder of betrayal. They were a badge of my resilience. With that final step, I felt ready to step fully into the new life I had created for myself. It was a life that wouldn't be defined by what had happened to me, but by how I had chosen to rise above it. As my life continued to transform, I began to explore new relationships, cautiously but openly. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just people to share good conversations and laughter with. For the first time in years, I felt no rush, no pressure to find someone to complete me. I was whole on my own, and anyone else would just be a welcome addition to the life I was already building. One evening, at a friend's gathering, I met Emma. She was warm, funny, and had a kind of ease about her that was refreshing. We started talking, and before I knew it, hours had flown by. She wasn't nosy or pushy, didn't pry into my past or judge me based on the scars I carried. We talked about our favorite books, places we wanted to visit, dreams we were working on. It felt effortless. By the end of the night, I realized I was laughing without the slightest hint of the heaviness that had lingered over me for so long. We exchanged numbers, and as I walked home, I realized that, for the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or dreading the potential for hurt. I was just happy. Over the next few weeks, Emma and I kept things light, enjoying each other's company without any rush or expectation. She became a friend and a confidant, someone who understood that I wasn't looking to dive headfirst into anything serious just yet. But in her presence, I found a quiet comfort, a reminder that not everyone in the world was waiting to betray me. Some people were simply good. And through my growing friendship with Emma, I felt my faith in others, and even in myself, slowly returning. As time went on, my friendship with Emma blossomed naturally, without pressure or urgency. She became a constant presence in my life, someone who made me laugh, who listened without judgment, and who shared her own dreams and struggles openly. With her, I felt a level of trust and connection I hadn't thought I'd ever find again. One evening, we found ourselves walking through the city, talking about the past, our mistakes, and the things we learned along the way. I hadn't planned to open up about my marriage and the betrayal I'd gone through, but somehow, with Emma, the words just came. I told her everything, the painful details, the anger, and the process of rebuilding myself afterward. She listened quietly, taking it all in, her gaze warm and steady. When I finished, she looked at me with a small smile and said, "You've been through hell, John, but you didn't let it destroy you. I think that says a lot more about who you are than anything else." Her words struck a chord deep within me. For so long, I had seen myself through the lens of betrayal, feeling defined by what Sarah and Mike had done. But in that moment, I realized Emma was right. I had come through the worst of it, and I had built a life that was truly my own. As we stood there in the quiet night, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for my strength, for the journey, and even for the pain that had led me to this moment. Without it, I might never have found this version of myself, a person who was whole and resilient, capable of moving forward. Emma reached for my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to take a new chance on love, no longer haunted by the past. As I looked into her eyes, I felt that the future was brighter than it had ever been. I was ready for whatever came next. Thank you for watching along. Have you ever found yourself in a similar journey of rebuilding and rediscovery? If so, feel free to share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about resilience, growth, and the power of new beginnings.